Welcome back to Disturbed Reality. Since covering cartel content on the channel, we have covered such criminal organizations such as CJNG, Los Zetas, the Sinaloa Cartel, the Gulf Cartel, and many more, though one organization that I have yet to cover are Cartel De Juarez, or the Juarez Cartel, one of Mexico's oldest criminal organizations. The organization started in the mid-1980s following the restructure of the Guadalajara Cartel, Mexico's largest cartel at the time. They dominated the landscape, primarily relying on the cultivation and distribution of marijuana, though on the 14th of November 1984, the Mexican army, with assistance from the DEA, raided the Rancho Buffalo marijuana plantation in Zacatecas and burned 5,000 metric tons of marijuana worth up to $2.5 billion, which belonged to the Guadalajara cartel. It's said that the information leading to the operation came from DEA agents, one being Kiki Camarena, who was working undercover in the Guadalajara cartel. It's said that he managed to locate the plantation while working undercover. Following the destruction of the marijuana farm, the top bosses in the Guadalajara cartel, such as Felix Gallardo, Rafa Caro Quintero, and Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, were enraged, and they demanded retribution. The leaders within the cartel somehow realized that Kiki Camarena was an undercover agent. He was subsequently captured and he was tortured over a 30-hour period and then murdered. His skull was punctured by a piece of rebar and his ribs were broken. Camarena's body was found wrapped in plastic in a rural area in the state of Michoacan on the 5th of March 1985. It said that Kiki's murder was recorded on audio tape, where he can be heard pleading that he has a family. Following the discovery of Camarena's body, tensions between US and Mexican authorities grew, and the spotlight was placed on the Guadalajara cartel, with the authorities increasing the pressure on the organization. At this time, due to the pressure from the authorities, it's believed that Felix Gallardo called a meeting with the top bosses where he would divide the cartel up into different territories. For example, it's said that Joaquin El Chapo Guzman and El Mayo Ismael Zambada would take over the Pacific Coast operations, eventually becoming the Sinaloa cartel. The Ciudad Juarez route would go to the Carrillo Fuentes family, headed by Amado Carrillo Fuentes. The organization would go on to be known as the Juarez Cartel. Essentially, Gallardo changed the structure of the Guadalajara cartel into localized sectors with area managers. The plan was for Felix Gallardo to take a backseat approach and micromanage the organization from the top down, handing more responsibility to area managers, though Felix Gallardo was arrested on the 8th of April 1989, which would be the final nail in the coffin for the Guadalajara cartel. After Felix's arrest, the likes of El Chapo, El Mayo, and the Carrillo Fuentes family would go independent, creating their own cartels. Ultimately, the arrest of Gallardo would prove to show the ineffectiveness of the kingpin strategy. Sometimes, capturing or killing the leader of a high-profile criminal organization can result in the fracture of said faction and, in turn, lead to the creation of more cartels. Other examples of this would be the creation of Los Zetas and even CJNG. During their early years, particularly in the 1990s, the Juarez cartel were extremely powerful and influential. They were one of Mexico's biggest criminal organizations. This was largely down to the leadership of Amado Carrillo Fuentes, a feared leader who ruled with an iron fist. Though, in 1997, Armando died following complications from plastic surgery, it's believed that the medication given to Armando after his surgery is what killed him due to his weak liver, which makes you wonder whether this was an elaborate hit. Regardless, one of the doctors, Jaime Godoy Singh, was found shortly after dead, stuffed in an oil barrel partially filled with cement and abandoned along the main highway between Mexico City and Acapulco. The doctor's body had signs of severe torture. After the death of Armando, a brief war erupted over the control of the cartel, with Armando's brothers, Vicente and Rodolfo, becoming leaders after defeating the Munoz Talavera brothers, as well as others. Despite gaining control, infighting within the organization remained, though by 2002, the brothers and their nephew, Vicente Carrillo Leyva, had a tight grip over the organization. They planned on expanding and collaborating with other organizations. In fact, they managed to create a working relationship with the Sinaloa cartel bosses, including Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Ismael Mayo Zambada, and the Beltran Leyva brothers. The authorities and the media dubbed this new pact as the Federation. On the surface, the new partnership made sense. In the early 2000s, the Gulf Cartel were cementing themselves as the biggest criminal organization in Mexico, partly due to the brutality of their armed wing, Los Zetas. The new partnership would ensure that the Sinaloa cartel and the Juarez cartel would remain competitive with the Golfos. Though, as you would expect, this partnership did not last long. In 2004, Rodolfo organized the murders of 2 El Chapo associates, as allegedly they were not paying him to use the Juarez corridor, so, according to Rodolfo, they had to die. Shortly after the assassinations, news reached El Chapo of what transpired, and naturally, he was enraged. There was no time for talking or smoothing things over. El Chapo and his associates ordered the assassination of Rodolfo. On the 11th of September 2004, Rodolfo Carrillo Fuentes headed to a cinema complex where his wife was taking their little daughter, and he forced them to leave the movie early as he had warned them to stay away from a public place such as the cinema. As they entered the parking lot, they were ambushed by sicarios. Rodolfo and his wife were shot dead by the gunman, who proceeded to flee, leaving his young daughter to gaze upon the bodies of her parents. By late 2004, the war between the Juarez cartel and Sinaloa was on. Shootouts, decapitations, and public displays of violence became the norm. It was an incredibly brutal war. Cartel De Juarez would go on to create their own armed wing to battle Sinaloan forces. The group would go by the name of La Línea, or the Line in English. They were a paramilitary group with combatants who were former soldiers and police officers, similar to Los Zetas. Despite the fact that the Sinaloa cartel were also at war with the Gulf cartel and Los Zetas during this time, they still had enough resources and men to overpower the Juarez cartel. Ultimately, it was Sinaloa who went on to win the war. In recent years, the Juarez cartel have split into smaller factions like La Línea, who appear to play more of a role in controlling territory formerly held by the group. Today, the Juarez cartel is still battling rival groups in its traditional stronghold of Ciudad Juarez. More than 1,200 murders were committed there in 2018 alone, marking the first time that the border city had recorded more than 1,000 murders since 2011, when the Juarez and Sinaloa cartels were engaging in a bloody war for control of the strategic border town. The current violence is likely driven by the Juarez cartel's splinter factions, as well as the local street gangs that such groups use as enforcers and soldiers in order to secure territory for small-scale drug dealing, as well as trafficking larger shipments across the border. In November of 2019, the La Linea faction of the Juarez cartel was linked to the brutal massacre of 9 dual US-Mexican citizens from a cross-border Mormon community. The reasons for the killings are unknown, and the case is surrounded in mystery. In recent years, the Juarez cartel has been battling Sinaloan forces in the border state of Chihuahua for key smuggling routes leading into the USA. A Sinaloa cartel-linked group known as Los Salazar, who primarily operate in Sonora State, and the Juarez cartel faction, La Linea, operating in Chihuahua, have been battling each other heavily in recent years. It's also said that La Linea, in the past 12 to 18 months, have arranged a working relationship with CJNG to eliminate Sinaloa cartel members from the state of Chihuahua. The Juarez cartel, as it was once known, is a shadow of its former self. Fragmentation has plagued the group for the past few years, and it seems like the armed wings it developed for security purposes now have more sway in the border regions under the group's control. In relation to shocking content, the Juarez cartel, much like many other criminal organizations in Mexico, used the execution video tactic during their war with Sinaloa. Many such examples have been lost in the deep dark archives of the internet, though one example is still available to view online, that being the brutal murder of Joaquin Gallegos, who was allegedly associated with the Sinaloa cartel. But nevertheless, what happens in the actual video? The video itself is around 5 minutes in length, and it opens with a message from the Juarez cartel which reads the following. El Diego continues at 100 with La Linea. This is what is going to happen to the betrayals that do not believe and who support El Chapo. Allegedly, the victim in the video is a police officer. As the video plays, you see a shirtless man wearing shorts laying down on the ground with his hands tied behind his back. He has also been blindfolded. The setting is an empty concrete room. At least 2 cartel members are in the room with him, one being armed with a baseball bat. He swings the bat and strikes the victim in the body, making sure not to hit the victim in the head. This process is repeated several times. He is struck in the back, in the stomach, the legs, and the arms numerous times, all while he wriggles on the floor in excruciating pain. The video contains several jump cuts, and as it progresses, you see the bruising and markings on the victim's body become more and more apparent. According to various reports, the victim died due to the beating. They strike him so many times, I can only imagine the pain due to internal bleeding, bone breaks and fractures. Later in the video, the victim is laying on his stomach and isn't moving as much. He is then struck on the back of the neck several times with the bat. This appears to kill the victim, or at least incapacitate him. The video then jump cuts once again, and the victim has been stripped completely naked, and he appears to be dead. At this point in the video, a cartel member can be seen carrying a double-sided, medieval-looking axe, and he proceeds to dismember the victim's body. He starts by cutting the victim's right arm off at the shoulder, which only takes a few strikes. He then dismembers the victim's hand off the severed arm. Following this, he then decapitates the corpse after a few axe swings. The head is then held up to the camera in usual cartel style. The video then jump cuts again, showing further into the dismemberment process. At this point, the axe-wielding killer is cutting the corpse's legs off at the top of the thighs with the axe. The video then ends with a message that says the following: "To the ministerial police who support Chaputo, for those who do not believe, here is the proof that Joaquin Gallegos was executed on the 13th of May 2011. Keep on supporting El Chapo." This is where the video ends. It's an extremely brutal watch. When it comes to these sort of videos, blunt force trauma really does get to me. So naturally, as always, I wouldn't recommend that you search for this video. But ultimately, this video is just another example of the sheer violence that these cartels commit in Mexico on a daily basis. Although this case is old, the sad fact is that this is happening right now to real people in real time. I know I've said this before, but covering cartel content in particular has really opened my eyes to what is going on in the world, and obviously in particular Mexico. The biggest eye-opener for me is, to this day, I still get DMs from people who are living in Mexico as we speak, who have to live around this, and they will provide their first-hand accounts of dealing with cartels and what they've been through. And honestly, it never gets easier reading those DMs or those private messages. Again, it just goes through my mind, this is happening to real people in real time, and ultimately, nothing is being done about it on both sides of the border, because the reality is, too many people are getting paid, not just cartels. And yeah, it's a sad situation. Ultimately, all we can do is spread awareness to what is going on, what is happening right now. Again, you guys know my dream for this channel. My dream would be to actually go to Mexico and cover this firsthand to some degree, speak to people on the ground, whether it be victims of cartel violence, whether it be police officers, or even cartel members themselves. I would love to do that to some degree, but we shall see what happens. But yeah, that is the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, if you can enjoy this sort of content. Once again guys, thank you for the support, it's much appreciated. YouTube in the last few weeks have been a little bit aggro with me, you know, due to the content that I make. So to see your guys' support and encouragement, always, you know, it really does spur me on and it encourages me to make more content. So thank you guys very much. If you guys have any video topics, please feel free to share them in the comments below. It would be much appreciated. And yeah, as always, stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one.